When our motivation is driven by deficiency and we're trying to earn and get something, we tend to become unresponsive to listening to our body, for example, because it's just like we're empty and we're trying to get something, and we're driven by this idea of something out there is going to make this thing in here feel better. So welcome to this week's Flourishing Friday. And Flourishing Fridays is where I'm focused towards practitioners, those working as either in the medical world or the psychology world, coaching world. But really, how do you support yourself in being the most successful but sustainable version of the work that you're doing? And I think this week's Flourishing Friday is also going to be super relevant to people that are on their own healing path or people that are trying to do things in the world that have strong achiever patterns. I explored yesterday on Thoughtful Thursday about hard work takes hard work, but how to do that in a healthy, sustainable way. Well, for today's episode, I want to talk about healthy ambition. Put another way, what is the sustainable and healthy expression of the achiever pattern? So we often, when we're working on these patterns, we tend to think that, well, therefore it must always be wrong. Like having drive and ambition must be wrong. Wanting to help others must be wrong, because these patterns, when they're out of balance, can cause a lot of problems and a lot of suffering. But ultimately, it's not that ambition, it's not that wanting to do and achieve things in the world is wrong. It's the place that we're coming from. So if you're working, for example, as a practitioner and you're wanting to build a practice, you're wanting to earn a living doing the work that you love and that you're passionate about, that takes work. It takes an enormous amount of work to establish and build a practice for, particularly if you're doing it on a kind of significant scale. The question you have to ask yourself, though, is what is motivating you? Where is the ambition? Where is the drive coming from? If the motivation is that something is deficient inside of us, something feels like it's missing, we feel like we need to achieve to win the love and respect and kind of care of others. It's almost like our own happiness is linked to how much we do and we achieve, so we can kind of win that. That's unsustainable. That's unhealthy. That will lead to burnout. If we're motivated because we are passionate about and we love what we do, and we have a kind of deep motivation, inspiration that's not just about achievement, but it's about genuine kind of love and passion and care, that's a different motivation. When our motivation is driven by deficiency and we're trying to earn and get something, we tend to become unresponsive to listening to our body, for example, because it's just like we're empty and we're trying to get something, and we're driven by this idea of something out there is going to make this thing in here feel better. If we're driven in a way which is in tune with our heart, in tune with our kind of purpose and our connection, then when it's time to go slower, we can go slower. When it's time to kind of listen to other needs in our life, we can pay attention to those as well. So there's the fundamental drive is really important. If the drive is to fill a deficiency, often we're not going to stay in balance and we're not going to listen to other needs. If the drive is because we're in connection and we're in the kind of flow of what we love, then we tend to be able to back off, to slow down, to listen, to stay in tune with ourselves. I think another piece here which is important, and I think it's something which I think is very rarely spoken about, and I think because it's not spoken about, I think it causes a lot of problems. And that's life is always about compromise. And I think relationships are all about compromise. I think careers are all about compromise. But also when you intensely focus on one area of your life, there is a compromise in other areas of your life. And I think one of the reasons why this is a problem is a lot of teachers in the self-development world are kind of promoting this narrative that you can have it all. You can have the amazing career, the perfect relationship, the perfect health and body. And there's a kind of Instagramization, if that's such a term. But there's a kind of illusion that I think is created about how everything in your life can be awesome and perfect. I'm not saying that it can't be. I'm just saying that if you go full in on your career, there is a necessary compromise in other areas of your life. If you go, just like people that are on a healing journey, often their healing path has to take priority over perhaps their career or over intimate relationship periods or over friendships, that you kind of go all in on needing to attend to and take care of that. Same thing is true that if you're driven and you're hardcore in terms of pushing career, there can be impacts on other areas of your life. And this is something for me personally, which has been an ongoing kind of, internal dialogue, but also ongoing dialogue in terms of with the key people in my life. And it's taken a number of years to kind of find the balance and find the rhythm, which allows me to really chase the things that I really am passionate about and I care about, and kind of drive forwards with things that I think are really important in the world, whilst also maintaining a healthy, connected relationship with my wife and with my children, and having time for other things in my life that bring me pleasure and joy. And it's that balance is different for other people, and maybe that's something that we'll talk more about in other videos. It's a whole exploration of its own of how you make those balances and how you fit together those different pieces. But I think this idea that we can just chase and push everything at the same time, it's a lovely idea, but it's not generally how it goes. And we have to figure out how we're going to prioritize and how we're going to perhaps give absolute focus to one part of our life. If you're, for example, building your practice, maybe it's between the hours of 9 and 5, for example, that you're absolutely committed and focused to your work. And of course, you're available if something is a crisis in the rest of your life. But then when you're not focused on that, and let's say you're focused on family time, that you really do switch off from your work and you switch on to the family time, for example, that's happening. But healthy ambition needs that balance. One of the things that I have been guilty of historically is negating other areas of life which actually become an important counterbalance. So hobbies and friendships and things that are kind of, for example, having friends that are completely outside of your career and your work life, I think can be really important. And so it's like, if we're driven by nature, if we're ambitious by nature, it's very easy to get sucked into a default pattern with that. And we need to remember that we also have to have those counterbalances, those things that bring us back into balance, which also then allow us to sustain in the drive and ambition in terms of what we're doing. So the more the rest of our life is in order, actually, the more it supports the thing that it is that we're passionate about and that we're trying to bring forth and to make happen. The other thing I want to say is these are all big themes on their own. They're all things we can unpack in future videos. But the other thing that I want to say as well is that I think most people significantly overestimate what they can do in, let's say, a year. And they significantly underestimate what they can do in a decade. And therefore, and perhaps the same thing is true often on the healing journey, we overestimate what can happen in a month, but we underestimate what can happen in a year, for example. So it's, I have students which are coming through the practitioner training, and they're kind of saying, well, I could never kind of achieve, Alex, what you've done. And I say, well, if you had 17 years on your career, you might be surprised what you can do. It's when you've been doing something for a long time that some things take years to master. And you need the ambition and the passion and the love of what you're doing to sustain you on the journey to do that. So just to kind of summarize this a little bit, what's motivating you? What's the underlying drive of the ambition? If it's a deficiency you're trying to fill, you won't tend to listen to your body. You won't stay in balance because you're chasing this thing on the outside at any cost. Is it, where are the compromises? What needs to be kind of, how do you order your priority of your ambition and, for example, your work and your building your practice versus the other areas in your life? And are you doing that consciously, or are you in a kind of denial of, oh, it'll all be fine. If I can just get there, then that will fix that. And actually, that's a point I missed on that we can think, if I can just get to this stage on this thing I'm working on, that will fix the other things in my life. My experience is rarely does success in career fix problems in relationships. Rarely does rarely does kind of finding more mindfulness and spaciousness in our meditation practice fix problems in our work and our career. And this is a whole big area that I'd love to get into in the vlog, where I think there's lots of confusion. We think if I can just get really good at self-development, that'll figure out my professional development. And I think all these areas are individual arenas of mastery, and there are shared insights and shared kind of skills sometimes, but we do have to master each of these areas by ourselves. It's one of the reasons why there's so many scandals of spiritual teachers around sex and money, for example, because people assume because they're spiritually awake, they're good at those other areas, and that's often not the case. That's another theme, I think, for another vlog. Making sure that the rest of your life is in order, that provides the stability and the support to be able to sustain in terms of what you're doing. And the final thing I want to say is hold it lightly. Healthy ambition is held with a level of humor and a level of playfulness. And it's like your whole life is not going to fall apart if you don't achieve this thing that you're trying to move towards. And actually, the more the rest of your life is in order, the less kind of eggs you have in the basket of things having to go perfectly or going the way that you want them to. So lots of themes here, lots of things that open up in future vlogs, but hopefully that's just some helpful general principles around what supports healthy ambition. Tomorrow it's Spotlight Saturday, and I'm going to just respond to some of the feedback from last week's Spotlight Saturday related to this vlog and the future direction. Talking of healthy ambition, I'm taking a week's holiday. So Sunday will be the last episode for a week. So yeah, I wanted just to respond to some of the questions and feedback in tomorrow's vlog. So I look forward to talking with you then.